has been sustained. So let us move on. We'll go to the protective or security principle. So now, if the country refuses to extradite the offender, that's not an issue, then it is fine. The country which is willing to actually prosecute, there's no problem. So when you talk about protective personality principle, this is whereby the offense is committed by a non-national. So this is where the offense is committed by a non-national and occurring abroad. It is not, the offense hasn't taken place within your territory. It takes place in another territory and it is committed by a non-national. But perhaps this offense is one which is threatening your security as a state. Then you can exercise protective or security principle. So this means that an offense can be committed abroad by a non-national. But if this offense is bordering on your security and happens to be a threat to your national security, then it simply means that you as a country whose security is at stake can exercise the protective or security principle. We have the universality principle. The universality principle is the principle where a state can prosecute based on offenses which are prohibited by international law. So this is where terrorism falls. So this is where a state can exercise jurisdiction in respect of an offense committed which is against international law. For example, international war crimes. The last one is the passive personality principle. Passive personality principle, the easiest way for you to understand it is this way. On the nationality principle, I said it deals with the nationality of the offender. The passive personality principle deals with the nationality of the victim. So this could be an offense that is committed by a non-national, but the victim is your national. That is the passive personality principle. So the passive personality principle is the opposite of the nationality principle, in that nationality principle deals with the nationality of the offender, but passive personality principle is talking about the nationality of the victim. So if the victim is a national of your state, then you can prosecute the offender. So these are the 5 principles as to jurisdiction. Any question? Any question?
Which principle is using?
Sorry?
Which principle is that you're using?
The one that I'm using. Sorry?
I'm saying, which principle is Zambia using one principle, or maybe it has just to adopt one when need arrives?
You look at the circumstances of the case, that is what will make you settle for one principle. So I can't say that Zambia is using this principle. There isn't anything like that. It will be determined as and when need arises according to the circumstances of the case and in the interest of justice.
Okay.
Any other questions? I give them
out. If so, then victim can't prosecute.
There's someone whose mic is on, so I can't hear what you're saying. You can go ahead and ask your question. The explanation, which explanation? Which explanation do you want me to repeat? Tell me which explanation I should repeat. I've seen a question, repeat the explanation. I'm asking which explanation should I repeat? Which one? Universal principle is the principle where a state can exercise jurisdiction in relation to any wrong which is prohibited by international law. For example, international war crimes. That is the universality principle. And we also have the passive personality principle. This is where a state can exercise jurisdiction in cases where the victim is its national. So I said for passive personality principle, what is important is the nationality of the victim. But for nationality principle, it is the nationality of the offender. So that is the difference. Any other questions? Are there any other questions? No questions, all right. I want to talk about jurisdiction with regard to aircraft. Jurisdiction with regards to aircraft. This part is not that confusing as well. Just get my explanation. So, when you talk about the airspace, let me just explain something. I'm sure you're aware that the concept of territory does not only refer to the landmass, which most people are familiar with as only the only element constituting territory. A territory consists of the airspace, a territory consists of the waters, a territory consists of so many other things, even minerals and so on. Those are considered to be part of a certain territory. Now, with respect to an offense that can be committed aboard an aircraft, there are several conventions that have actually been developed. So what happens is that the airspace is very active in terms of activity that can be conducted. The airspace is very, very active in terms of activities that can actually be conducted. We see a lot of planes flying over, over and above the landmass that we have here in Zambia and everywhere else. And as they are flying, there are a lot of activities that can be conducted. Crimes can be committed. A business can take place. And whatever takes place on the soil can take place in the air. Therefore, each country has a deliberate policy in place which ensures that the airspace is kept safe. And each country has to be in agreement with other countries when it comes to them flying anything over their airspace. Each country has to be aware of the fact that their airspace has to be secure, free from any interference, because wars, if anything, can actually take place in the airspace. So much can take place in the airspace. A country can be raided, people can be killed. We've seen airplanes being hijacked. These are things that we do not only hear, but we are seeing are happening. So the law deliberately came up with a number of conventions to try and see how they can regulate the use of the airspace, maybe to see how the crime rate can be dealt with in the airspace, to see how best countries can deal with each other when it comes to the airspace. So the most important thing that you know is that conventions have actually been put in place. You are aware of IATA. So I would say almost all the travel agencies are members of IATA, IATA. These conventions ensure that there is order in the manner in which maybe aircrafts are operated from one destination to the other. And it is inevitable that one country will pass through the airspace of another country due to increase the industrial activity, political activity, and other activities. So from the inception, you will find the earliest convention that was passed is the Paris Convention on the Regulation of Aero Navigation in 1919, and 1944 Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation. So these are the earliest conventions that were passed. And then the Chicago Convention entered into force in 1947, replacing the Paris Convention of 1919. So this brought in place a number of requirements that before you can fly over the airspace of another country, you need to seek their permission. It is very dangerous, even if you brought your own private jet, to just fly over the territory of another country. You will be shot down. This is done in the interest of security. So in the convention, the Chicago Convention of 1947 in Article 6, the state is supposed to seek authorization to fly over the airspace of another state. And to this Chicago Convention, there are two supplementary conventions. So the mother convention here is the Chicago Convention of 1947, which replaced the Chicago Convention of 1999. And to this Chicago Convention of 1947, there are two supplementary agreements. The first one is the International Air Services Transit Agreement, IATA, the Two Freedoms Agreement. The second one is the International Air Transport Agreement, IATA, the Five Freedoms Agreement. This information is on page 42 of your modules. So in case you miss maybe one of the conventions that I'm mentioning, this information is there in your modules on page 42. So what you need to master here is, what do these conventions contain? So the Two Freedoms Agreement has the following contents: the privilege of flying across its territory without landing. So a state can allow you to fly over its territory without landing, and the privilege of landing for non-traffic purposes such as refueling or maintenance. So this means that maybe this flight is a direct flight to the United Kingdom from Zambia. We had British Airways, I think it just stopped operating. So British Airways, for it to get to the Heathrow Airport, it needs to fly over the airspace of certain countries. So they can rely on this convention where it is just flying over. And if at all it has to stop in a particular territory, then it will only stop in that territory for non-traffic purposes, maybe refueling or doing something, which will not enable it to be in there for a long time. And sometimes it can just be an emergency landing. But we do have some flights, maybe Kenya Airways, Ethiopian Airlines, we have Emirates. You discover that maybe en route to certain destinations, there's that flight from Dubai, it will come through Lusaka and then Harare. So it means that for that aircraft to be able to do that, it entered into the Five Freedoms Agreement. And the 5 freedom agreements, you get the 2 agreements in the first supplementary convention, and then add on these 3 to make them 5, where we have the privilege of putting down passengers, mail and cargo taken on in a territory of the state whose nationality the aircraft possesses, the privilege of taking on passengers, mail and cargo destined for the territory of the state whose nationality the aircraft possesses, the privilege of taking on passengers, mail and cargo destined for the territory of any other contracting state, and the privilege to put down passengers, mail and cargo coming from any such territory. We know there are cargo planes. For example, DHL, I'm sure has a number of cargo planes. We do have some other planes which do transport a lot of goods in different airlines. Those are specifically cargo planes. DHL, I think, deals with parcels, maybe up to, I don't know what size and so on. So we expect that such aircrafts are actually signatories to this convention. So there is order. So if you're an individual or you're a new company operating an airline, you get excited and just start flying your airplanes over the airspace of other countries, there's a possibility that you might be shut down. And well, we've heard of some stories whereby a certain country has not been informed that there will be an aeroplane flying from point A to point B, and such airplanes have actually been brought down. I think you've heard of Zambia Air Force. Zambia Air Force has a number of operations to that effect to man the airspace. Should there be any object which is suspicious, they've got the right to actually bring it down. They have their own rules in place as well. Any questions so far?
I have a question, Councillor.
All right. Now we're going to look at jurisdiction.
I have a question.
Oh, you have a question? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. My question is based on the countries that are flying over a certain state must communicate that they are actually flying from point A to B. Now, considering the relations, international being law, but not really law per se, are countries which that particular not, in for example, it is a sovereign country like, and then it wants to fly over to another state, right? That it has got the right to fly wherever they wish to go, nationally related to that particular state.
I'll try to answer your question, although you were breaking. So if you feel that there's a certain part that I have not responded to, then you can just repeat. What I can say is that, if I got you correctly, you are talking about maybe this state has not been recognized by the other state, if I got you right. So how will they be able to seek permission to fly over the territory of another state? That is very true. However, you need to be mindful of the rules that regulate the airspace. So there has to be a way, because I have seen situations whereby individuals have private jets. You hear that a person jetted into a certain country and so on. So definitely these conventions are open and quite flexible to make it possible for individuals owning aircrafts, as well as countries owning aircrafts, to be able to seek permission to fly over the territory of another state. So what I think is there is a way through which that can be done, even if these states might not be in very good terms and so on, but there's definitely a way through which a way can be found that one country flies over the territory of another, even if they do not have so much dealings together. If there's any part that I've left out, then you can ask me, because the line was breaking. Any other questions?
No, thank you. You have cleared it. Thank you for me.
Thank you. The last part, I want to talk about offenses committed on board an aircraft. Remember, this topic is primarily dealing with jurisdiction. So, for example, if an offense is committed on a South African Airways airline by a Zambian against a Japanese, maybe, which country exercises jurisdiction? So we're just going to get a bit of clarification from the conventions. So we have under Article 17 and 18 of the Chicago Convention, on an aircraft possesses the nationality of the state in which it is registered, and it can only be validly registered in one state. So if this airline is Zambia Airways, it was registered in Namibia, meaning it will get the nationality of Namibia. Even if the name is Zambian Airways, it doesn't matter. That's what they are saying. So the first international attempt to deal with the issue of offenses committed on board aircraft was made by the Tokyo Convention on Offenses and Certain Other Acts Committed on Board Aircraft of the 14th of September, 1963. And the objectives of the convention include to ensure that persons committing crimes aboard aircraft in flight or on the surface of the high seas were not allowed to go unpunished because no country would assume jurisdiction to apprehend and punish them. Secondly, for protection and disciplinary purposes, to give special authority and power to the aircraft captain, members of the crew, and even the passengers. Those are the objectives of the Tokyo Convention on Offenses committed on board aircraft. And to address the problem where an offense is committed aboard an aircraft, the following provisions were given in Article 3 to say the country of registration of the aircraft is competent to exercise jurisdiction. So if you're aboard the South African Airways aircraft, the offense is committed by a Namibian against a Zambian, then as long as that aircraft was registered in South Africa will exercise jurisdiction. Offenses committed on aircraft are for purposes of extradition to be treated as if they had occurred also in the territory of the country of registration. So it means that if this South African has committed an offense on Air Namibia, he can be extradited to Namibia, if that is the country of registration. And the captain of an aircraft can disembark a passenger and hand over to a police of a country party to the convention. So it means that the captain of an aircraft at any time, if need arises, can actually have the plane land in any of the countries which is a state party and hand that particular person over to the police for further prosecution. And what you need to know is that these provisions are actually applicable to civil aviation and not military aircraft. So the Hague Convention, we are also going to look at, there's also another convention, which is the Hague Convention. So this convention is working hand in hand with the Tokyo Convention. This is the Hague Convention for the Suppression of Unlawful Seizure of Aircraft of 1970 on page 43 of your modules. So the Hague Convention is also supplemented by the Convention for the Suppression of Unlawful Acts Against the Safety of Civil Aviation. And under this, there are two points that were mentioned. We have aircraft in flight and aircraft in service. I'll be able to explain that later, and I'm about to finish actually. So some of the categories of offenses that are covered under this convention are acts of violence against a person on board an aircraft in flight, if that is likely to endanger the safety of the aircraft, destroying or causing damage to an aircraft in service so as to render it incapable of flight or which is likely to endanger it in flight, Placing or causing to be placed on aircraft in service any device or substance which is likely to have this effect. Destruction or damage of air navigation facilities or interference with their operation if any such act is likely to endanger the safety of the aircraft in flight. Communication of information which is known to be false, thereby endangering the safety of an aircraft in flight. This covers bomb hoaxes. So you just scream on the aircraft, oh, there's a bomb, we're about to die. Such acts are offensive. Or when you are traveling, there are certain substances which you are not allowed to carry, such as liquids, there are certain explosives and so on, meaning if you are found in possession of those, you will have committed an offense. So the main difference between an aircraft in service and in flight is that an aircraft in service is considered to be in service from the beginning of pre-flight preparations by ground personnel or by the crew. Maybe they're cleaning it, preparing meals, and so on. When it is in flight, it's after all external doors have been closed and now you are planning to take off. So basically, that is a summary of what you expect to find under jurisdiction. Please do take time to be going through each and every activity. We don't have time to do so. We have limited time, so we do not have time whereby we can go through these activities and discuss them. But in your own time, or if you have groups, please do discuss and attempt to answer these activities, because who knows, maybe an exam question can come from one of the activities. Anything is possible. Are there any questions before I give you an assignment to do for the next class? Any questions? Any questions? All right.
Okay.
All right.
To find,
yes.
To find out as to, okay, we've seen quite a lot of activity happening pertaining aircraft, crimes on the aircraft. It actually put just on an aircraft would keep them both claiming.
Yes, you can go ahead with your question.
Well, can I don't know, you were out of it.
Yes, you just start again.
Question.
No, I didn't hear it, so just start.
Okay, I'm saying, okay. There are instances when a passenger aircraft is held hostage in the air, for example, an aircraft, then it is held hostage in a Zambian example, and then claiming the people holding. Oh, it's okay. I'll just write your message to find out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions, class rep, you can just take note of this. You'll know how to divide yourselves. I'll